Good evening, everyone.
Danielov, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, Gemar Chatimat Tova. Here we go, get started.
Kavod Harav, we were in the middle of the Bet Yosef, Yud Bet.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll start here. Garcina Besot Pek Shlosha Sheachlu. It says in this Gemara, which is Nun Amud Bet in Brachot, Tan Rabbanan. The rabbis taught, Yain ad shelo natan letocho mayim. If you have wine, until he puts water in there to dilute it, and mivarchin alav, we don't bless on that, Bari Pir Gefen. Notrim mimenu yadayim. And we said we do wash the hands though. You know, if you don't have any water, that's the idea. Mishnatan letocho mayim. Once he puts water in there, and notrim mimenu yadayim, so then we don't wash the hands with that anymore. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. This is according to Rabbi Eliezer. Chachamim omrim ben kach or ben kach en notrim mimenu yadayim. The rabbis say either way we don't wash the hands with that. Peresh Rashi en mivarchin alav. So Rashi explains that we don't bless on it. The fishaya yanam chazak meod, right? As we said last week, right? We spoke about this, that their wine was very strong. The en rawi lishtiyah, so it wasn't fit to drink without dilution. ולא מים ונותנים ממנו לידיים בשם מים עליו, the shem מים עליו. So he says we can't wash the hands with it because it's cold water. The me perot mikre. Why? Because it's fruit juice, basically, which is a type of water. Okay, so that's that. כתב מרדכי, it says מרדכי, פרק אלו דברים, this פרק, that which we asked in the Gemara, חולין, קוף זין עמוד א', כף דינן החזותה. Are we particular about the way the water looks, the appearance of the water? But tzarich iyun, mihad yaminan, it says needs to be investigated. From that which we said, פרק שלושה שיאכלו, in this פרק in brachot, יין עד שלא נתן לתוכו מים, נוטלים ממנו לידיים. As we said, right, that until you put water into the wine, we can use it for washing the hands. So he says, so he says, right, that's talking about, apparently, he's talking about white wine. The Rosh says, משמע מתוך פירוש רש"י, implies from the words of Rashi that all fruit juice is fitting for washing the hands. But once he adds water into it, Shem Yain Alav, so then it's called wine. In other words, we're talking about obviously grape juice, right? We're not talking about orange juice. So okay, so orange juice is not wine. So it goes on. So he says you cannot wash with wine. The tema the perkol basar minan. So he says it's a wonder that we're saying perkol basar in the which is in Chulin, the kavdina amana the achazuta. So he says that we're particular about the vessel and also the appearance of the water. And we learn in Yadayim she'im ishtanu marehen psulin. That if the appearance of the water changed, then it becomes pasul, disqualified. Ama afilu mare mayim bainan. So you see from there that we also require that it should look like water. So he says when it comes to fruit juice, right, it doesn't look like water at all. I guess that's why that other rabbi said that we're talking about the white wine. Okay. Anyway, so he says maybe we can differentiate and say when it comes to water, if it changes, the color has changed to a different color. So then we say, right, that's like a change. So it's not fitting anymore. So that makes it like inferior. So it's worse than fruit juice, because they have the original appearance. So he says they're called water. Fruit juice. So it says it seems more like the reasonable, like the perush of the Ravad. That he explains that which we said that you can wash the hands with the wine like that. He's not talking about washing hands for eating a meal. So he says because you can't use any juices for that, any beverages. Only water. So he says because they made the washing the hands for the mundane food like immersion for truma. So he says we can only make mikveh from water. Right, so I guess you'll have to avoid making a mikveh from fruit juice, right? That's off the menu there. So it says, and his hands didn't wash his water. Dichtiv, right? That's what the verse says. He didn't wash with water. So you see that you do need water for that. So it says from there the rabbis learned in Chulin Kufa Amud Aleph regarding the washing the hands. So he says rather when he talks about the issue of using fruit juice for washing hands, he's talking about for cleanliness purposes, not for having a meal. So he says we are it says in the words of Rabbi Eliezer, we can wash the hands whether in the beginning or in the end. What does that mean? Beginning of the meal or end of the meal? And some have different texts. It says like this, right? Once he puts water in there, cannot you wash the hands with that anymore. It's talking about the wine. So that they said that that's talking about the final waters, mayim achronim. The lav orach ar'a, because it's not the proper way. The mashe beyadeh, that you should wash your hands with that. And then you're gonna bless on it. Okay, so what he's saying is that it's not proper to use wine to wash your hands, and then after Birkat Hamazon, you're going to make a blessing, Borei Pri Giffen. Interesting. Okay, so goes on, right? Bedek Habayit, here we go. וכן כתב בספר שולחן של ארבע. It says in this book, מים ראשונים דווקא ולא שאר משקים. So he says it's only talking about the first washing, meaning what, before the meal, and not other beverages. Ad kan, right? That's the end of it. Torah Beit Haroch, and this book, right, which is from the Rashba, Katav achar devarim halalu shel Rabad. So he says after the words of the Ravad, Kilashon hazeh ubilchot netilat yadayim shechiber hu, and the laws of washing hands that he authored. Pirashad netilat yadayim, he explains netilat yadayim המכשירים לאכילה, which is qualifies it for eating. וכן ודאי נראה דאה לא למה, so he says, it seems like that. That's why it seems. Why? Because if you don't say like that, אין נוחצין בו את הידיים, we're not going to wash with the hands. שאין נטילה אלא על שם antal. Right, so he says the word נטילה, right, then it is antal, על שם שצריך ליטול בכלי. So, right, because you have to take it with a vessel, right? And by the way, that's not exactly what we said before. If you remember, right? We spoke about this issue. Why is it called netilat yadayim? Washing hands. It should be rechitzat yadayim. Which is like washing. So why is it called netila? So he explains like this, right? The reason why it's called netila is because you're using the vessel. In other words, you're picking up a vessel. So you're pouring it out from a vessel. And that's why we call it netila. You're using a vessel. Right? So that seems to negate the notion that the reason why they call it netila is because you're raising your hands after you wash. Okay, interesting. So that's the way Paskins in this Torah Bait Katzar, which is also the Rashba. So it says the Rashba that wine is kosher for washing hands. Whether he added water in there or not, he diluted it or not. By the way, for us, it's like a foreign concept, right? Like, why would you want to wash your hands with wine? So, this shows you, by the way, something. As a side point over here, which is that if they were washing their hands with wine, that shows you that wine was much cheaper in those days. Because, sometimes we buy wine, it costs like $20 or $40 or $50. You know what I mean? And who's going to wash his hands with that? just cost them $10 to wash his hands. Right? Nobody's going to be crazy enough to do that. But in those days, wine was dirt cheap, so that's why they didn't mind doing that.
During the pandemic, people were using like vodka in place of like.
Okay. Okay. So that's interesting. Yeah, by the way, this is one of in the Talmud. This is one of the signs of Mashiach. That they say the wine will be expensive in those days, which we definitely have fulfilled in our times. Like, why should wine cost $20 a bottle? It's ridiculous. Or even $10. Like what is it? What is it? Just grape juice basically. It's absolutely ridiculous. The truth is, it shouldn't cost more than $1. But inflation. So, Now people are talking about that, right? Recently, of course, there's been a lot of problems with that.
You
So
can't
anyway,
even
right,
get
that's.
grape juice for $1, though.
I'm sorry.
You can't even get grape juice for $1.
Absolutely, yeah, that's the thing. Everything's expensive. So it's ridiculous. The prices today are ridiculous, especially for wine. Which has been expensive, like for already many years. Like I don't remember last time there was cheap wine around. Okay, so anyway, that's the story there. Obviously, if a person has water, he's not going to use wine to wash his hands. We're talking about a case where you don't have water, and we do have water. Because we have a sink, we have running water, so we don't really have this issue. So much, whatever. But in those days, they did. Sometimes they didn't have enough water, so they use a cheap alternative. Which is wine. Okay. וכן פסק בתורת הבית הקצר, right? It says in Rashba also, as we said. אלא שאסור לעשות כן לכתחילה, but he says, Rashba says, even though you're allowed to wash your hands with wine, but he says, don't do לכתחילה. Why is that? כדי שלא יהיה כמזלזל בדבר חשוב. This is because you're like, you're treating it lightly, like something which is, prominent. In other words, in Judaism, right, wine is a very prominent thing. We do all kinds of mitzvot with wine, very, important things. So using that kind of thing to wash your hands is like you're diminishing its value, its honor. That's what he's saying. It's a good point. והגאות השרי, פרק ב' לברכות, it says in this book, כתב בשם אור זרוע, it says the name אור זרוע, אין נוטלין מיין שלנו לידיים. So he says we don't. He says our wine. He says we don't use for washing hands. Interesting. Why is that? I guess it's because they add water to it. They dilute it. So as we said, right, when you dilute it, you can't use it anymore. Anyway, by the way, the Ashkenazim are notorious for diluting wine. They're some of their wines, like that are the Kiddush wines you buy in the store, Manischewitz and so forth, all that stuff. Some of them are like 80% water, believe it or not. It's like kind of weird, but it's very strange. That's why we Sfaradim, since we don't want there to be a majority of water in there, because that makes it according to our custom, if the majority is water, it makes it into shakol, the blessing. So that's why sometimes we don't use the Ashkenazi wine, which is like heavily diluted, like I remember when my rabbi was speaking about these issues. He used to say that the wine that they sell, the Ashkenazim in Israel, which is like badatz, like it's a hechsher, whatever, it's like the OU of Israel, badatz. So anyway, right, over there, he says the standard dilution is like it's 17% wine only. Can you imagine? It's less than 20%. That was the original ratio that they used to use. So that's like 1 out of 5. Is only wine, right? Even less than that. So the rabbi complained about this, to Badatz, because he told them, he says, we Sephardim, we can't use your wine because it's mostly water. So the rabbi came out, and publicized this. Don't use these wines because they're just mostly water basically, and you have to make a shekel on this. So he went and complained to the Badats, and so you know what they did, right? They told him, okay, Rabbi. So you know what they did, right? They added 3% more, so it became 20%. This was their solution to the problem. But the rabbi was not satisfied with that, right? He said, no, 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 it has to be majority wine to make that good for Geffen. So he used to tell the Sfardim, the rabbi in Israel, don't buy that stuff, that Ashkenazi wine. It's all water. Okay. But the truth is, I'm not going to get into this whole issue right now. What I just brought up, because there's a lot to discuss about that. A different time, we'll discuss that. This is not the time now. When we talk about the laws of blessings, we'll get into that issue, which is coming up right pretty soon. It's on the way. Okay, so anyway, right, that's the story there. So let's finish this off. So says the Rashba, right? But when it comes to, he says, but he says, when it comes to other, liquors, he says, right? Not only liquors, but yeah, liquor and also right other types of things like honey. Right? He says there we can use it more readily. Why? Because it's not so prominent like wine. So in the time of need, he says you can use that instead of using wine. So says the Bit Yosef regarding this Rashba. So he doesn't agree with one thing the Rashba says, right? That we can use honey for washing hands. Why is that? So he says because it doesn't really clean you. It's sticky. It's icky. So that's not a good substance for washing hands. Really, basically, that's what he's trying to tell you here. Doesn't really clean the hands. It just makes you sticky. So therefore, right, we'll take the honey off the table. We'll use it for Rosh Hashanah only, but not for washing hands. Okay, so that's the story there. Very good. So we'll go to the Shulchan Aruch. That was Yud Bet. Okay. Yud Bet. So it says Shulchan Aruch, Hasherek v'abarad v'akefor v'agelid, right? So we're going back to what we were talking about last week, reviewing all that, right? Going back to that issue. So what are we talking about? Snow, right? Hail, right? Ice, right? And hail, all these kinds of things, frost, whatever you want to call it. The amelach and also the water, the salt. He says, "Im riskan ad shenasu mayim." If he if he pounded it till it becomes water, so we can use it for washing hands and also for mikveh as well. Yeah, we spoke about this already, right? That you take the ice, whatever snow, you put it into the mikveh. Once it melts, right, it's a kosher mikveh. So same thing, right? All the more so for washing hands. You let the snow melt. You pick it up, right? You put it into a vessel. You let it melt, and then you can use it for washing hands. But you see from there that as long as it didn't melt, right? It's as long as it's still solid, we cannot use it for washing, right, or for mikveh. יש מי שאומר שאין נטילת המים ראשונים אלא במים בלבד. So now he brings he brings us up to what we're talking about tonight more. So he says that when you're washing your hands before the meal, some say you should only use water for that and not any other beverage. Some say some say you can use wine. Whether he put water in there, or didn't put water. But the you shouldn't do that, right? As we saw in the Rashba, because it's too prominent. So he says, right, that one of the elements of wine that makes it so prominent is that also it has a separate blessing from all the other beverages, Ber Gefen. That also shows you that it's prominent. Okay, so then he says in parentheses here, some say that only applies to white wine, right? As we said, but not red wine, right? But it seems like we don't pass like that. You can use any wine, really. Some say any kind of juice, right, can be used for washing hands, right, time of need. So says the Ramah here, all the more so, right, you can use liquor, right, which means, like you said, vodka. or beer, right? Whatever it may be, right? Whiskey, whatever you got. So in a pressing time of need, you can use that. Right? So this is also right. As we said, honey, right, which is cooked. The ikaran mine. So we're talking about diluted honey, right, which is like mostly water. He says. Okay, so the Bet Yosef did say that honey is not a good choice because it's sticky. Doesn't really clean the hands. Okay, good. So we're done with that. Let's move on. Good, Gimel. So it says here in the tour, צריך שיהיה במים רביעית והנה מילה אחד אבל שניים שבאו ליטול. So it says the tour something interesting, right? As we already mentioned before, you need to have a revi'it of wine, of water in the cup when you're washing your hands. So says the tour that applies only if it's one person. Okay. I'm looking at the tour. Right, so it says the tour, but when it comes to two people, they came to wash their hands together. The second guy doesn't need revit. Why? Because it comes from the remainder of the revit that was used for the first guy. And they're coming to wash their hands together. Tetnan, like we learned in the Mishnah, Right, so it says, right, that we can use revi'it of water, one revi'it, even for two people. Okay. Wait a second. Mechatzi log af legimel. So it says, um, it's a half a lug of water, even for three people. Or a dalad melug, or if it's four people, one lug. Lehei, if I want five people, the yud gonna be 10. After kuf, even 100. So yeah, even for 100 people, you can do the same amount, which is four lug. Kamar goes guzma kamar. So he says, right, this is like an exaggeration. 100 people, right? What does that mean? Kol zman shemaspikim, all the while that it's enough, for to wash. Hamayim nishpoch lechol echad, for each person, and you do a bet pamim two times. Ben shenotlim ze achar ze, whether they're doing one after the other. Ben shenotlim kulam keechad, or they're doing one in one shot, everybody. Titnan notlim dad or hey, that says like it says in the Mishnah, we washed what 4 or 5 people. Ze betzad ze, one next to the other. The zel gavze, and also one on top of the other. Ubivat sheyovo beim mayim, as long as the water comes on them. Perush yecholim lianiach yedehem ze avagav ze. That means that they can put their hands one on top of the other. V'litol keechad, to wash like together. Ubilvad sheyipu yedehem, as long as there's slack room between them, between each of the hands. Binyan sheyagia mayim lechol echad. So that means the water can get to each one. Okay, that's the end of the tour. So let's go to Bet Yosef. So it says Bet Yosef over here, Peg Kula Basar, right? It's over there in Kula Basar, which is in Chulin, Daf Kuf Zayin Amud Aleph. Amar Rabba Kli She'en Bo Revi'it. So says Rabba, if you have a utensil, a vessel, doesn't have Revi'it, and Notlim Mimenu Yadayim, we don't wash the hands with that. Any, Gemara says, really? But didn't Rabba say that a vessel which doesn't hold a revi'it, we don't wash hands with that? If it does hold, but even though it doesn't, even though it doesn't have lokasha, so Gemara answers no difficulty. One's talking about one person, the other one's talking about two people. The Tanya, as we learn in the Braita, right? That when you have a revi'it, you can wash the hands le'echad for one person, even for two people. Amar le Rav Sheshat. So this rabbi tells him le'amemor, to amemor kafditu ashiura, right? That what you're particular about the size, right? The volume. Amar le lo. So he says no, we're not. So the question was, are you? And the answer is no, we're not. Because we learn the Mishnah, that when it comes to Revi'it, we can wash the hands for one person, even for two people. So he says, no, not so. There it's different. Why? Because it's coming from the original amount, which was a Revi'it. In other words, there was a revi'it originally for the first guy, and then the second guy doesn't have. It's okay, because they're washing their hands together in one shot, or one after the other, consecutively. Rashi explains, regarding that which we said, that one's talking about one person, the other one's talking about two people. So he says that when it comes to one person, we do require revi'it. Shaya Borev eat, but if you have two people that there was Revit, when Natal Rishon, the first guy washed his hands, then the second guy came and washed his hands. The lo have Revit, so even for the second guy, although there is not Revit for the second guy, Shapir Dam, it's okay. Hoyel v'mash u'meshire ta'ra'atu, because it's coming from the original amount, which was Revit. Kedemefarish lekame, like we're going to explain later on. V'chen direh midivei Tosfot. That's the way it seems from Tosfot. V'chen katav Rosh, also the Rosh. Mishnah zo hi shnuya beresh Masechet Yadayim. So it says this Mishnah is the beginning of Masechet Yadayim. Mere ve'id notrim yadayim le'echad. So it says when you have Revit, you can wash your hands for one person. Af l'shnayim, even for two people. Okay, I'm just looking at how long this is. It's pretty long. Anyway. If you have a half a lug, we can use three people, right? Three people can do it. Or le'arba, or four milug, with one lug, four people. Lechamisha le'asara umea. So there you can even have 5 or 10 or 100. The Rosh explains there, Tiknu chachamim shelo yitol yadam. The rabbis decreed that person should wash his hands yadav bepachot min revit. You shouldn't use less than revit, water. So it says, but when you have two people coming to wash their hands together, they can also use revit. Even though the second guy will not have a revit. Like it explains the reason in this parak, oil, which is in Chulin, oil v'mashire tarat, because they're coming from the proper size originally. At ve'oil v'shneim ba'u tahei, since both are coming to purify the hands, ke'echad together, shire tara mo'ilin l'sheni. So therefore, the remainder helps the second guy to do it. But if it's less than a beat, also if you have a half a log for four people, the log given sheyesh b'mayim arbe, so it says even a log where although there's a lot of water, even for 100, that's an exaggeration. That means to say that as long as the water is enough, they can each one can wash his hands twice. And similar to this, explained by Rabbi Shimshon. That's also the words of the tour. Okay, very nice. Let's go on. So you should know, Tosfot in Chulin, Katvu Hadetnan, they wrote that which we learned in the Mishnah, Masechet Yadayim. Natal Yado Echad B'Shtifa. He washed one hand by pouring Echad Yado Teorah. That if he did it with just one pour, his hand is pure. What about two hands? With one pouring. Rabbi Meir says no good. Actually told me unless he uses the Rabbi. Perush afilu be'ein mishire tara, even though there's not a remainder of the proper size. The lo ba'u Rabbi kishnotel b'shtei teshtifot, because you don't need a Rabbi when you're doing two washings. Ve'ashta deleka el hashtifa echad. But it says now, since it's only one washing, you do need Revit in this washing. When you're washing one hand, he says, you don't need Revit. Because it came from the remainder of the proper size. Rather, that washing should be enough quantity for two. Same thing seems to mean from the Rosh. He says beperush Masechet Yadayim, and the perush of Masechet Yadayim. Umashma shehen sovrim the halacha Rabbi Meir, and it says it implies that they hold the halacha like Rabbi Meir. V'chein katav be'edi Rabbeinu Shimshon. So it's also on Rabbi Shimshon the leka man de palig al Rabbi Meir. Nobody argues with Rabbi Meir. It says v'chol zeh katav b'samag. All this was written in the Samag, but Timehani al Rosh. So he says, I'm wondering about the Rosh. Shelo izkir chilukim alalu. He didn't mention these differentiations. The perk kol basar and this perk in Cholin. But Gama Rabbeinu shelo izkiram ve'o. And also Rabbeinu the Tur also did not mention these differentiations. Okay, let's go on. Rabbeinu Shimshon says Rabbeinu Shimshon, Perek Bet Masechet Yadayim. Second Perek of Yadayim. The Ita betosefta. It's written in Tosefta. Notnin dal v'hei that we can wash 4 or 5 people. Zibet tzadzer, one next to the other. Ve'en choshim mishum shemen yitmeu. And we're not concerned that maybe became defiled. Mishum shemen aseh behem melacha. Maybe there was labor done with the water. Mishum shemen lo nitlu. Or perhaps they were not washed. Mean kli from the vessel. Mishum shemen lo nitlu min avit. Because also they weren't washed from the Ravit. Klomar she'im naflu miyad zeh liad zeh. That means to say that if they fell from one hand to the other, nitmeu became impure. B'naseh behem melacha, there was labor of them. V'lo nitlu min hakli, and they were not washed from the vessel. If that's the case. Ve'en choshishin nami sheme lo nitlu min haravit, and this is also we're not concerned that they were not used poured from Revit. If you have a half a lug for 5 people, but that if you had half a lug for 5 people, it says in Mishnah, first parak of Mishnah Aleph, first Mishnah, half a lug for 4 people, not for 5. נמצא שכששמש הולך ושופך מים על ידיהם, it comes out that when the servant, right, whatever, the goes and pours water on their hands, if when they when the 3 people wash their hands, there still remained in the cup, right? Adain nishar b'kli revi'it there. Mehania netilat neshnaim, so then the washing does work for the last 2 people. Safek hayadem teorot, and doubtfully, right, as we said, when you have a doubt about washing your hands or cleanliness of hands, we always say that we go lenient. So therefore, it's pure. Okay, so let's see how much more we got here. Okay, I guess we can probably try to finish this. So, מה שכתב רבנו שנותנים זה אחר זה, בין שנותנים כולם כאחד. So that which the Torah said, that whether they're doing one after the other or together, right, whatever it may be, regarding this, says Bet Yosef, Lashon HaMishnah, he brings a source, right? The Mishnah Perek Bet Masechet Yadayim, Notrin Da'at Vehei, the 4 or 5 people can wash with the same vessel, Zebut Tzadze, one next to the other, or Ze Al Gabeze, or one on top of the other, Vivad Sheirpu Shevo Behem Mayim, as long as they're loose enough, the hands, that each one is going to get water poured on it. So Rabbeinu Shimshon explains Be'rosh and Rosh, that means that it has to be loose enough that the water can pour on all of them. The Rambam says there, so he permits that many people can wash with that. ידיהם קצתם על קצתם, right? Some on top of the other, ולא נאמר כי המים יורדים. This was only said where the water which is coming down מידיים from the hands, הידונה הם משקים טמאים. They're impure. לפי שהם מים ראשונים, because that's the first pouring. והידיים אשר תחתיהן לא יטהרו במים ההם. So therefore, right, the hands which are under that will not be purified because it became impure from the first hand. כיוון שהוא טמא, since it's impure, the hand, לפי שהם כולם ממדרגת יד אחד. So since they're all on the level of the first hand, the one hand, anu choshvim otam, so right, we consider like one hand. Oh. But as long as they're not too tight, right, the hands, the water doesn't get in. In order there should not be an interposition. כתב הרשב"א, says Rashba, בפרק כל הבשר. Had Aminan over there in Perek, right, which is in Chulin. That which we said, we can use Revi for one person, even for two people. So we said, right, the reason is because it comes from the remainder of the proper measure. So it says we have to ask a question. How does that work? If both of them are washing it one shot in one time, so then what are we talking about? Right, that there's leftovers for purity. In other words, the size of the purity, which is a revit. Demand the minayhu batra. That which one is the last? The atu bezeh acharzen. And if they're coming one after the other, ki atu mikoch revi'it. When they're coming from, right, originally a revi'it. My ave. How does that help you? Hashta miha leka revi'it. Now there's no revi'it. Ve'esh tamar. So he answers. There is to say the ma'ane bezeh acharzen. We're talking one after the other. As long as the flow of water, right, should not stop. The kalhu shekilu bentila. So is this like a leniency that they did with washing hands? V'chen pirash Ramban. It also says in Ramban, mishum dehava nitzok chibur, because the pouring of the water is like a connection considered. The Aminan, like we said, mikveot le'inyan mikveh kol zman. We're going to mikveh. All the wine sheraglab shedrishon b'mayim hashani tahor. As long as all the while that the feet of the first guy are in the water, the second guy is pure. Also taught about katab pamim. It's Rashba. Notnim shenotnim shenayim be'evit kitzad. So sometimes two people can wash from a revit. Kitzad how? So hayar revit mine b'kli. Let's say you have a revit inside the vessel. Pashat echad yadav, and one of them stuck out his hands. Litol to wash ve'achar yotze al yadav. And the other yotze, I'm sorry, the other guy yotzek al yadav. He's pouring on his hands. Ubashani pashat yadav lemata. And then the second guy came, right, and spread his hands below. Below him, and then right the stream of water goes down to his hand. The first guy, and also the hands of the second guy that are below him. So both their hands are clean. Even though the size of Revi'it was reduced here. Kishen Magin Yadav, when it comes to his hands, Shoshani to the second guy. Yadav Terod, still his hands are pure. Because they're coming from the remainder of the purity. Vesh Metirin Afilu Kishenotilin Ze Achazeh. Some allow that even if they're right, one is washing after the other. Since when the first guy started, he told him to wash from them. There was Revit in the beginning. Even for the second guy, so they even count for the second guy. Because they came from the remainder of Tara. Arishon, Kidat Rabotai Noche Nefesh. So he says that's in the right in the opinion of my rabbis who are very compliant, whatever you want to call it. Okay, Ad Kan Chanel, that's the end of it. So it goes on a little bit here. ואפשר שאם ידי השנים מרוככות מידי הראשון, so it says it's possible that if the hands of the second guy, מרוככות, are distant from the first guy, לא עלתה לו נטילה, there could be that the washing doesn't work like that. לפי שהוא נוטל במי רחיצת חברו, why is that? Because he's using the water which was used to wash his friend, in other words, the remainder, right, the remnants. It only works when one is next to the other, right, very close. So then we consider like one hand. So that's an important thing, right? If they're far away, then it's like the remainder from that hand coming on this hand, no good. But if they're close by, it's like considered like one hand. Okay, interesting. So I'm going to do Shulchan Aruch. We'll stop. Well, this is like a little bit tricky, this stuff. But we'll do our best. So says Shulchan Aruch here. As we said, right? Originally, when you're washing your hands, you gotta have to have a revit there. That's only for one person. If two people are coming to wash their hands together, right? Second guy doesn't need revit. Only the first guy. Even if they're doing one after the other, as long as the the pouring does not stop. In other words, the stream of water is not stopping. So it's considered to be like one washing. Let's say there was revit of water in the vessel. So one spreads out his hands, and then the other guy, right, pours it out on this guy's hands. Right, so in other words, they're washing together, like, one from the remnants of the other. And the second guy came and spread out his hands, below him, right next to the hands of the first one. So the stream is going down on his hand. The first guy. Also the second guy, which is below him. So they're both pure in this case. Even though there's now diminished amount, right? Not a Revit, the second guy. When it comes to the hands of the second guy. Anyway, his hands are pure because they're coming from the kosher amount, right, from the beginning, originally. There are some who allow, some even allow this when they're doing one after the other. Because when they started to wash, the first guy had Revit. So then it counts also for the second one. Because they came from the purity, the original pure volume. So it says in this manner, we can wash with a half a lug for 3-4 people. Right? And also from a lug, you can use even more people, right? Several people. As long as each one gets, some water spilled on his hands. Give it 3 times. So he says they can put 4 or 5 people, right? Their hands, one next to the other. Oh, ze al gav ze, or one on top of the other. But he told ke'echad, and to wash together, right? Vivad sheyirpu yadehem, but they have to loosen their hands, as we said, right? They shouldn't be too tight together, right? Be'inyan sheyigiu hamayim lechol echad. So that means that each one will get water poured on his hands. Okay, that's the end of Shulchan Aruch. This is a very unusual scenario, right? Nobody does this today, but interesting anyway. Maybe we'll review this Shulchan Aruch again, right? Next time, Bezat Hashem, tomorrow, so we can just have it a little bit fresh in our minds, Okay, whatever. If you're interested, if not, we'll just go on. Because none of us are doing these things, but anyway, it's kind of interesting, I guess, to some people. Okay, anyway, right? So if you have to be the right type for that. Okay, I'm the right type for that. So, Bezat Hashem, thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Gemar Chatima Tova. Chazak Baruch Laila Tov. We'll see you tomorrow, Bezat Hashem. Amazing. You should know, by the way, we're having miracles going on. In this war, there are miraculous things going on. It's incredible what's going on. We call it because what they did last night basically was they found all the places where they have their ammunition, the missiles, and they bombed them. So they had like huge explosions, and like all the bombs exploded, all the missiles, and it was like devastating. They say that they destroyed most of their missiles already. We're talking about 150,000. It's like it's miraculous, It's just totally miraculous as well. Hashem is making miracles for us, I guess it's time for the Geulah, where the redemption is very close. What can I tell you? The signs are coming. Okay, Bezat Hashem, we'll see you tomorrow. Chazak Baruch.
Kavod Harav, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
God bless.